You know, some kings get to reign for decades, right? They build these huge empires, leave this incredible legacy. And then there are the others. Today, we're diving into the story of King Nadab of Israel, a ruler whose entire time on the throne lasted just 2 years. But believe me, his short, violent story tells us so much about the fragile beginnings of a kingdom and how a deadly pattern can be set for centuries. So the big question is, how did it all go so wrong, so incredibly fast?
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This isn't just about one guy making a few bad choices. No, this is about a nation's identity crisis. It's about inheriting bad policies, and it's about a prophecy that finds its fulfillment in absolute bloodshed. So yeah, how does everything just fall apart like that? Okay, so before we can really get into Nadab's fall, we have to look at the hand he was dealt. And trust me, he wasn't inheriting some ancient, stable empire. This was a brand new, fragile kingdom that was literally born from rebellion, and you could already see the cracks forming.
Let's just put this in perspective for a second. In 931 BC, the whole kingdom of Israel splits right down the middle. Just about 20 years later, in 910 BC, Nadab gets the crown. You see, this isn't some old, established dynasty. It's basically a startup monarchy, and Nadab is only its second CEO. And his reign is so short it barely even makes a blip on the radar before, bam, he's assassinated in 909 BC.
So you've got Nadab, the son of Jeroboam I, the rebel who literally tore the northern tribes away to create their own kingdom. Nadab is the heir, the first ever dynastic succession in the north. I mean, the pressure is on. Everything is riding on this guy to prove that this new nation can actually last.
And this is where you can really feel the pressure cooker Nadab was in. His kingdom, the northern kingdom of Israel, was just so politically fragile. Meanwhile, down south in Judah, they had the established House of David, a lineage people believed was backed by God, and they had a reforming king named Asa on the throne. Nadab's kingdom? Well, it had none of that history. Its entire foundation was the rebellion his dad started.
You know, with such a shaky inheritance, you'd think Nadab's first move would be to reform things, to try and build some stability. But nope, he chose to double down on his father's most controversial and, frankly, most dangerous policies.
And here it is. This is basically the official report card on Nadab's reign, and it's a big fat F. The key part is that phrase, walked in the way of his father. See, his biggest failure wasn't that he created some new problem. It was that he absolutely refused to fix the massive one he inherited.
So, what was this big sin of Jeroboam anyway? Well, it was a state-sponsored religion born completely out of political fear. Jeroboam was terrified that if his people kept going south to the temple in Jerusalem, they'd eventually switch their loyalty back to the house of David. So he set up his own rival worship sites, these golden calves, and even created his own priesthood. It was a political fix that the Bible frames as a total spiritual disaster.
And this is why it all matters so much. By just continuing this policy, Nadab basically cemented it as the official religion of the North. And this very system, this sin, is the thing that gets blamed again and again for all the instability and for the kingdom's ultimate destruction by the Assyrians almost 200 years later.
So Nadab's refusal to change things doesn't take centuries to cause problems. Oh no, the consequences come fast, and they come violently, and not in the capital city, but out on a foreign battlefield.
So picture this. King Nadab is out there trying to look strong, right? He's leading his army, laying siege to a Philistine city, trying to take on Israel's old enemies. He's totally focused on the enemy in front of him, and he has no idea that the real threat is standing right behind him, in his own army.
And that threat has a name, Baasha. He's one of Nadab's own commanders. But here's a crucial detail. He's from the tribe of Issachar. Nadab and his father were from Ephraim. This little detail hints at all these tribal rivalries just simmering below the surface of this supposedly united kingdom. And that's the real turning point here. The kingdom doesn't fall because of the Philistines. It completely implodes from the inside. Baasha makes his move.
It's really that simple and that brutal. The king is struck down in the middle of a military campaign, and the assassin immediately declares himself the new king. Just like that, the first dynasty of the Northern Kingdom is over.
But Baasha doesn't just stop with the king. To make sure his throne is secure, he carries out a total, ruthless purge. He kills every single member of Nadab's and Jeroboam's family. And this is where the biblical story connects this political massacre directly to a divine prophecy. A prophet named Ahijah had warned Jeroboam this exact thing would happen because of those golden calves. So for the writer of the text, Baasha wasn't just a power-hungry traitor. He was an instrument of judgment.
So Nadab's assassination, it wasn't just the end of his short story. No, it was the beginning of a truly terrifying pattern for the entire northern kingdom.
What happened to Nadab out there on the battlefield set an awful precedent. It basically sent a message to every ambitious man in Israel that the path to the throne wasn't through inheritance, it was through violence. The first domino had just been pushed over.
So what did that precedent lead to? I mean, just how unstable did things get? The answer can pretty much be summed up in a single, stark number. 9.
9. Can you believe that? The Northern Kingdom burned through 9 different ruling families in its short 209-year history. It was just a revolving door of coups, assassinations, and civil wars. While the South had one continuous dynasty from David, the North was defined by constant, violent chaos.
And this right here is the cycle that all started with Nadab. A new king, usually a military guy like Baasha, grabs the throne. But instead of fixing the state religion, he keeps it going for his own political reasons. But that compromise just leads to more political instability, which sparks another conspiracy, another coup, and the whole awful cycle starts all over again.
In the end, Nadab's tiny 2-year reign is this powerful case study in how a dynasty that's built on a bad foundation just can't last. His story shows us how political choices and religious identity are just completely tangled together, and how they create a legacy of either stability or total chaos. And it leaves us with one final thought. If this vicious cycle defined the North, what was it about the southern kingdom of Judah that allowed its story and its dynasty to be so radically different?